G'day and welcome to the Genre Fiction Podcast. I'm Jack Roney.
And I'm Harry Colfer.
And Harry, we are introducing our special guest today, Carter Wilson. So, Carter, g'day from Australia. You're coming to us from all the way from Colorado, the United States. So we've had to kind of cater for the time difference. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate, I know that's not an easy time difference to accommodate.
And
It's not too bad on the grounds that I can drink coffee instead of red wine, but
I hear you.
And we're just chatting, so it's about 9 o'clock our time, and it's already a sweltering hot summer's day, and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon your time, and you're talking about you've got a winter chill coming with some snow. So
Snowy and
one
cold.
extreme to the other.
Yep, exactly. So,
perhaps there should have been an outside podcast. We could have got the two.
So Carter, you're an accomplished author and podcaster. So today we're kind of mixing things up a little bit, where you're on the other side of the table, and instead of you being the one asking questions, you're on the other side, so you can kind of kick back and let us do the work for a change.
I love it.
It's not quite the case because we'll probably just ask a few things and you have to do all the talking this time.
Yeah.
But I don't have to prepare. But I don't prepare in my podcast either. So it's all very loose.
Sounds like me.
So you've got 10 novels published. One thing we normally like to get things underway is when we're speaking to authors is to first of all find out about their publishing journey, but to really kick things off, what is it that inspired you to start writing?
There was zero inspiration. I didn't study writing. I was a business major in college. I was in real estate finance for years. And it was actually a weird story. When I was 33, I had to take this class, this 8-hour long class, a continuing education class for an appraisal license, which is as exciting as it sounds. And I was 6 hours into this class and I was bored out of my mind. And so I decided to pose myself a riddle. I just made up a riddle and it turned out to be this little murder mystery riddle that just popped into my head. I'm like, all right, I'm going to spend the last 2 hours answering this riddle, seeing if I can figure out an answer to my own made up riddle. And I couldn't figure it out. So I went home and it kept nagging at me. So I started writing about what a possible answer would be to explain this murder mystery riddle. And it just kept going and it kept going. And I'm like, I'm writing a lot here. And in 90 days, I had this 400-page manuscript. And nothing like that had ever happened in my life before. It was this weird inflection point where the universe kind of said, hey, maybe be curious about the fact that you just wrote this terrible book. And so I was. So that kind of kicked everything off. So then I said, what do I do with a book? How do I? And that's where I started Googling and learning about agents and the publishing industry. And I did get an agent with that book. It's the same agent I'm with now, 21 years later. But my first 3 books didn't sell. So and of course, they shouldn't sell because I didn't know what I was doing. So I just kept at it, daily practice for the last 2 decades. And, you slowly get the hang of things.
Can you remember what that riddle was the catalyst for your writing? Can you remember what that riddle was?
Yeah, I do, because it ended up being that first book that never sold. But I remember I wrote down, if 3 people are murdered in different parts of the world at the exact same time and in the exact same fashion, what's the connection? And that became the basis for this crazy ass story about looted Nazi art and all this stuff. And that's kind of how I write now. I start with just this kind of idea for an opening scene, but I don't know anything else. And I just start writing and I'm like, where is this going to go? So I'm definitely don't outline.
That sounds very much like a pantser then.
100%. And I've tried to outline, because it seems like logical and just my brain doesn't work that way. And, you realize over time, for me, at least, the joy of writing is that discovery, is sitting down like, what happens? I don't know what happens. And that's so cool because that means anything can happen. But there's a lot of negatives. You can write yourself into some pretty fierce corners as well.
The plotting's for the editing.
Exactly. That's it. I just let that first draft just flow out of me, and it's terrible usually.
Mm.
And then it all comes alive in the editing. That's where you hear your voice and you really start to slash. And I love editing because it's where you take that block of clay and start scraping away until something emerges from beneath.
Cool.
And that first manuscript that you wrote, did it eventually end up getting published?
No, no, my first three never went anywhere. And people always say like, doesn't that hurt? Don't you want to do something with those? I'm like, they weren't for naught. They were all part of my learning process. You need those words to figure out how to get better. So that's, and you're still getting better 10 books in, you realize like, oh, I'm getting better, but there's still so much more to go.
Yeah, and Harry and I have talked about that a lot in other podcast episodes where we talk about our own learning paths, and you got to start writing ugly to begin with. And I look back at some of the early stuff that I wrote, and at the time I thought it was brilliant. I was going to be winning all these literary prizes, but I look back now and I think, oh my God, that's quite embarrassing. But it's all part of the journey, isn't it? I think when you can look back at your own bad writing from years ago and realize and kind of acknowledge that, I think that's validation that you have improved.
Yeah, totally. And it's so easy to look back and realize how hard you were trying back then. And it's so obvious when you're trying hard. And not that it's effortless now by any means, but when you kind of just get to a point where you can finally trust your subconscious to kick in with all the decades of observation and experience and just trust that process, it makes a big difference. But and to be honest, I don't look back at my old because it's so cringy. But I know that huge long descriptions and now I describe almost nothing. My writing is very economical because you got to find your voice. And once you find your voice, which I think probably was 5 published books in for me, you realize like, okay, I can trust this and I don't have to worry about, is this good or not? Just write what you want to write.
And do you model your writing style on any particular author? Like for me, I've often said that I have, in my young sort of reading days, particularly my early 20s, James Patterson, I used to love. I'd churn through all his books because, again, he's very economical with his writing. He doesn't get tied up in any sort of convoluted prose or descriptions. It's very fast paced. What about for you? Was there any particular style of writing or author or authors that you really loved their style, and or did you just organically develop your own style?
Yeah, definitely towards the latter, but that's not to say you're not influenced by people. I mean, of course, looking at Stephen King so what you do is you read stuff and then you don't say, how can I emulate this? You say, why is this having this effect on me? What are they doing? And, you can try to reverse engineer it, but you realize this is this author's thumbprints. But Stephen King, you start to realize like, oh, he tends to do this. And for me, that really helps with pacing. So maybe I'll try that. And by that, I might mean like 1 or 2 word paragraphs, so it's just the staccato bursts when you're in a scene that's building tension. Or I look at someone like Cormac McCarthy, who, none of us could ever write like Cormac McCarthy, but I will stop and say, why am I reading every single word of this? Why is he forcing me to really look at every word? And I couldn't even tell you the answer to that. It's just, to me, it's magic. So I think, again, it goes back to that subconscious, you've absorbed all this stuff. You've determined what you've liked and what works for you, and it comes out of you in some bastardized form.
Mm-hmm. And those first few manuscripts that you wrote, which effectively was just getting the words out, doing sort of your apprenticeship and writing badly, I guess. But have you ever, you said you don't kind of look back because it's a bit cringy. Have you ever been tempted to go back and say, look, the premise of the story was really good, but maybe I could go back, and now that you've improved as a writer and you've got your author profile, would you ever go back and blow the cobwebs off and have another crack at those stories?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't. And honestly, a lot of like the 3 of them, I don't remember all that well, but you get and especially because I write standalones, about 6 months into a new novel, something happens where I start thinking about something new. And then you find yourself like excited for that new thing. So usually that's the thing that's occupying my mind rather than trying to go back and resuscitate something.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason you stick to standalones? I just find that I've just finished my first series, which is 4 books, and I find it that basically you've invested a lot in your characters, and so it's
Right.
nice to keep them going. But
Totally. And congratulations for a 4 book series is amazing. And I think at the start of it, just from a business perspective, and of course I knew nothing about the business. I didn't have any kind of concept. I had written this one book, which I didn't even think about, could this be a series? What happens is when you're trying to publish that first book and you're an unknown and you just have the one book, no publisher wants to say, hey, maybe this could be a series, because they have no idea if that first book is going to do anything.
yeah,
So you really have to be, from my observation, you have to, if you're a new author, you have to be pitching a 4 book series. You have to have a completed 4 book series. Once you've established a reputation and a sales history, then you could potentially say, hey, publisher, I want to do a series now and sell it on a premise. But by the time that ever became possible for me, I just haven't had a character where I'm like, I just need to continue your journey. I've had 2 books take place all in the exact same house, 6 months apart, but entirely different set of characters, and both standalone books. But I've brought characters back. I've had, Easter eggs from other books, but nothing that makes the reader rely on having to read the other thing. And that's just because I love that whole world building. Where are we going to go now? What city are we going to be in? Who are the characters? And that's the joy to me, is that whole discovery process.
And I guess it gives you more power to kill your characters off too, if you want. It gives you a lot more flexibility.
Absolutely. And when you're a plotter, that totally happens. Or when you're a pantser, that can totally happen. I mean, I have a book where, that whole what if thing, I'm just constantly saying, well, what if this happened? Or what would I do? And I've killed off major characters on a whim because it just occurred to me. And then
this
you
would be
write
cool.
it, and it is cool, but you don't know, like you write it and I'm like, I could totally just delete this but I want to see what this looks like. And then you do it and you're like, this totally changes the course of this book. And I think maybe for the better. So you're not beholden to any character, but it's rare that I kill off, if ever, the protagonist, but my endings tend to be very murky. Like you don't know what happens. To me, they're hopeful endings, but to a lot of readers, they're like annoyed because it's unresolved. Did this person die? I'm like, I don't know. It's up to you. I have ideas, but it's once it's out of my hands, it's their book. It's their imagination that takes over, and they can do with it what they want.
Yeah, I've had a similar sort of instance in a book. I've mentioned it before in the podcast where basically I was just sitting in a coffee shop and I thought, and somebody's playing with a gun. And I thought, oh, wonder what happens if they shot themselves by mistake. And then it just went from there. And
Right.
and I sat
you
there
can
for about,
suddenly visualize that, right?
Yeah.
You see them playing with the gun and you're like, of course it's going to go off. It has to go off. Because why else does this gun exist in this moment?
yeah, and it's like it was like I sat there for like 15, 20 minutes just going, can I do that to that character? And they're like, yeah, what the hell?
Right,
Off I went,
right.
and it had major sort of, it actually fixed plot issues later because of that.
See,
and it
that's
was just
your
like,
subconscious
meant to be,
working. Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I've just started writing something new at the moment. I'm about 25,000 words in, but my premise was I've always loved stories like The Equalizer, Denzel Washington's character, where
Right.
he's a guy, he's unassuming, he's covert, he goes around doing bad things to bad people to help good people, but he doesn't want any praise. He's just doing it very covertly.
Right.
I just wanted a story that encapsulated a character like that. So that was kind of, I didn't know what the story was going to be, but I just wanted to have that as the underlying sort of theme. So I'm starting to peel the layers off and it's starting to unfold. But every now and then I hit a bit of a brick wall because I'm a combination of a Harry, you'll be pleased to hear this. I'm starting to pants more than I'm planning because I'm almost working chapter by chapter. I'm getting to a point. I know what's going to happen in this chapter, but I'm not really sure what's going to happen next. So I actually have to take a bit of a break and think about it. But that's where my planning comes in because I'm a real thinker and I'll spend time. But yeah, sometimes that's where the juice comes from, isn't it? It's just that idea.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, like I love a good revenge thriller. And I love the Equalizer series. Like I can watch those over and over and over again. And when you sit down to write something like that, it's satisfying, but I sometimes feel, because I've written definitely revenge thrillers too, you have to be careful because you're like, all right, am I being emotionally manipulative? Is this low hanging fruit, right? That they're killing bad guys. Even though I watch that shit all the time, I can't get enough of it. And I know that I'm being manipulated and that it's easy, but I love it. And you start thinking as you're writing, you're like, all right, I need to make sure I have depth here. So when he does enact revenge, there's a real payoff, just aside from the guy being the bad guy. But I love all that kind of stuff.
It's a bit like Dexter. He's another character that I love. You know, he's a serial killer that's containing his urges, but he's got ethics that he only kills bad people.
Totally. And I love Dexter. I never read the book. I loved it for like the first 3 or 4 seasons. And then they started and sorry if we're off-roading here, they started giving him feelings and emotion, and that really bothered me. Because I'm like, this is, he's a slave to his own basic instincts, and he knows how
psychopath.
he knows how to hijack his own code, but not to the extent that he all of a sudden has empathy. And they stopped showing him struggling against his impulses. And I always loved the struggle. It's like, I don't want to do this, but I have to. It's my nature. And that started when they started kind of getting away from that. I kind of lost interest because I'm like, I love just him. This is his struggle. And that's, I think, the most powerful part of that show. Yeah.
Yeah. Carter, what I'd like to delve into now, we talked about your first couple of manuscripts that didn't go anywhere. You kind of use that as a way to cut your teeth on the craft of writing. What can you talk us through the breakthrough moment? You mentioned going through agents and securing an agent, and you're still with that agent. And it might segue into stuff we'll talk about later in terms of the landscape in the USA, traditional publishing versus independent publishing and so on. But in terms of your own story, because a lot of authors are listening to us, the first question they're asking is, the people who have been published, how did they get published? What is it they need to do to get that breakthrough? Because we all know how hard it is to get that breakthrough. What's your story in terms of your breakthrough in getting published for the first time?
It was, and however you want to define breakthrough, right? Because we've all interviewed authors. We're all authors. We've heard all sorts of different stories, from that debut author who just hits the home run and is just, sells 1 million copies, again, rare, to someone like me who has just slowly, very slowly chipped away. So again, it was my 4th manuscript that became my first book. But that sale was to a tiny publisher that went out of business 6 months after my book came out. So I remember talking with my agent. I'm like, okay, let's keep going. My goal, and I'm very into goal setting. Like, my goal is to keep getting bigger. Not, I'm not saying I'm going to be a bestseller, but I want the next publisher to be at least bigger than the last one. And we were able to kind of keep doing that. And finally, when I landed with my current publisher, Source Books, Poison Pen Press, they are a big publisher. And, but that doesn't mean you have big sales. You're just with a bigger team. And so for me, it's just been, I just write 7 days a week, and I just churn books out, and I listen to feedback. I listen to my agent, my editor, and I ultimately write what I want to write. And I just kind of hope that somebody's going to buy it. And I try to be easy to work with. That's huge, that you want to listen to editorial advice. But I would say, honestly, if we want to talk about breaking through, being defined as you're becoming a known entity, that's probably happening right now with my book that's coming out in a couple of weeks. This has gotten more attention than I've ever seen with any of my books. And again, that doesn't mean it's going to sell amazing, but it's going to sell more than anything I've ever sold before. I know that for a fact. But it's, it's been 21 years.
Is that book 10?
That's book number 10. Tell me what you did. Yeah. And you don't know what the formula is. People are just really resonating with this book. And I remember when I was writing it, I was so exhausted from the previous book, which was a real struggle, really complicated book, and a lot of hard conversations with my editor because she wasn't gravitating to it the way that I wanted. Well, 2 years to write, which is weird for me, 4 months of editing with her. So finally, I'm like, I just want to sit down and write a straightforward, in-your-face, angry revenge thriller. And that's what I wrote. And that's the one that's like resonating. So I just wanted to get this out of my system.
Yeah.
I had no idea it was going to make a connection. And some of the books that I've written that I love the most, that I think some of the best writing, are some of the least favored books. So you just don't know. So for authors listening who are aspiring writers, just know it can happen to anyone. It can happen at any time. And it's a process. And the only thing you're in control of is writing every single day. And so I only write an hour a day, but I do it 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And if I do that, I can get a book done in 6 to 8 months. Hopefully, depending on if I know what I'm doing. So the author's journey is all over the place, as we know.
Is that first draft 6 to 8 months? And then you embark on the editing
That's
process?
first draft, yeah. But I don't do it. I mean, I know we talked a little bit about editing at the top, but I write that first draft, and then I spend about 3 to 4 weeks going through editing. I'm taking kind of notes as I'm writing that first draft. I'm like, this is going to be a problem. Make sure you address this later. And then I go through it a second time. And I think this time, actually, with what I'm writing now, I'm going to actually read it out loud, which I've never done before. But I'm going to read it out loud because I hear that that's amazing, that it's hard, but you catch everything. So I'll see. I might run out of patience for it. But after that, then it goes to my partner and she edits it. And then it goes to my agent. And a lot of times my agent has no idea what the book is. I might have told her the title, but then she gives me line notes after line notes. And then it'll go to my editor after that.
Yeah, with my last book, I took the advice of reading out loud. Although, it takes time, you do pick up stuff. And it's well
was that
doing
something you're going to keep doing that was worthwhile for you?
Yeah, probably, yes.
Yeah.
But that said, I've got to write another book, so.
Right. Well, that's true. I'm going to see what the process is. I mean, I assume if you look at the audiobook versions of things, it's 7 to 9 hours. So I assume that's probably, but you're stopping to, here's a punctuation problem or whatever.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. I might give up after the first chapter. I have no idea.
Carter, a question I've got for you relating to at what point did you or will you be able to ditch the day job, so to speak? Most embattled authors or writers have a day job because even those, quote, successful authors will often say that they don't earn a lot of money and oftentimes have to supplement that with some sort of income. What's your story in terms of your professional background, and have you reached a point, because we'll talk later about you also have a company where you're doing workshops and courses and retreats.
Right.
So at what point have you moved into this as your full-time gig?
Over the last couple of years, because my company ditched me. And I'll tell you the story. I went to hotel school, and so I've always worked in the hospitality field in consulting. And for the last 12 years, I oversaw the consulting division of this large kind of hospitality focused data firm, international firm. And then that firm was acquired by this multinational. And then the multinational, after a couple of years, just got rid of all consulting. So it was a very amicable breakup and severance and all that kind of stuff. But I was let go. My whole team, all consulting was let go. And this was in 2023. And for years, I had preached, like, don't quit your day job. Figure out how to write in your spare time. And that's all I ever did. My whole 1 hour a day came from the fact that, full-time job, family, we all know this stuff. And so after that point, I did some soul searching and just kind of realized, like, this is how many authors have we talked to who say, I left my job or my job left me. And that's when I decided this is when I'm going to commit. So I'm like, I'm living this right now. What do I do? And so I decided so first of all, I started my own consulting company in the hospitality space with one of the executives who was also let go with me. So we have our own, at-home business that we're trying to figure out. And then I started Unbound Writer, my writing company, because I love working with writers, but I need to make more money.
Yeah.
So I'm in this place right now where I'm busier than ever and making less money than I ever have. But ultimately, I'm happier. I'm living my own dream right now. I just need the money to kind of start flowing in. But it is all about kind of manifesting it and just really like focusing on what you love. And I truly believe the good things will happen. But that's a hard, that being said, I can't look you in the face and say I would have left that job, right? Because I was making good money, and that would have been a very hard decision to make. So I take it as the universe saying, hey, fool, listen to what you want to do and do this instead, and it'll work itself out. But, right now I'm I'm burning through a lot of my savings, but it's been amazing.
Yeah, my missus asked me, I think I was 35, and she asked me for my 5-year plan. And I didn't know what a 5-year plan was, but the one I
Right.
came up with was sailing around on a boat, writing books and taking photographs. And I think
That's
her quote
great.
was, I asked for a 5-year plan, not a 5-year dream. So
Interesting.
about a month ago, I've managed to arrange leave without pay for at least a
Hmm.
year, which I have. Well, I won't say that I have no intention of going back, but we'll see how it all pans out. But we're just about to put a deposit on a yacht, and yeah, we're going to see how that goes. So
I mean, good for you, because you do realize as we all get older, you do have more of a sense, not necessarily of mortality, but of what is it do I want to do with my life, and what are my fears, and are these real fears? Once you get to the point, and it will happen for most of us, where you're facing your fears, and then you just get this weird, almost meditative, instant sense of everything's going to be okay. I don't know how, but I just know it will be. That gives you a lot of power to make
yeah,
decisions of like, all right, I'm not going to be
gotta give
homeless.
it a
I can
go.
figure stuff out.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm a huge proponent of that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, with my line of work as a paramedic, you sort of see how so many different people who have saved up all their lives for their retirement, and then they drop dead,
Right.
a year before their retirement, and you're just like,
Right.
I really don't want to be there.
Right. And I think but I do think it's important for listeners to kind of know as well. You don't have to have mutually exclusive dreams.
Hmm.
So you might love your full-time job and it's giving you everything you need and it's giving you an income, and you might love writing. I think you should treat writing as a job and give it that power and give it that passion. But if you love your full-time job, why would you quit it? Like, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. If you can do both things, then you're
Totally.
home and hosed. You're producing the stuff you want to do, and you're also got an income coming in that's doing paying for the things you also want to do. I
And I
think
would never recommend to somebody to just quit their job and say, I'm going to make $1 million writing.
God no.
Don't ever do that. But there's an intention there that's important as well to have.
Yeah, and I think as Jack will attest to is that having a supportive partner is intrinsic in this whole sort of idea.
100%. Right. Right. Or if they're not supportive, that you're in recognition of that and knowing like you're not letting people limit your own
Yeah,
um, path forward.
yeah,
And Harry
yeah.
and I have had many conversations about this. We've kind of gone through similar journeys, and with me after being a police officer for 33 years, and then
Hmm.
doing similar to what Harry's doing now. I took 12 months off and had to make a decision around what I wanted to do full time. Um, and Harry's just gone through that recently. We've both got supportive spouses that we couldn't have done it without that support morally and that moral support. But you've also got to be sensible and have a financial plan as well. But for me, one thing
Right.
it's been very poignant for me only this week. A good friend of mine, he passed away only recently
Hmm.
from leukemia, and I went to his funeral 2 days ago. He was a serving police officer. It was a full honours police funeral. It was a very sad day. But he's a good friend of mine, and he's been fighting leukemia for the last 2 years, almost to the point that he was in remission the last time I spoke to him. Only recently, he was talking about coming back to work, and then he had a relapse, and within less than 2 weeks, he had passed away.
Oh my God.
But it was him. It was his advice when I was grappling with this idea of I'd been away from work for 12 months. I had to make a decision. I was at that point where I had to make a decision. Am I leaving or am I going back? My wife said to me, look, grow a set of balls and make a decision, because I was fluffing around for a long time. But it was my friend who said to me, he said, hey, well, look at me. Life is short. And he said, follow your dreams, do whatever makes you happy. And ultimately it was his advice. And sadly, he's not here.
Yeah.
And he was one of my greatest supporters in terms of my writing and pursuing that, and saying, look, if you want to leave the police and pursue your writing, it's a very valid thing to do, and own it. And just follow your heart. So yeah, life is short. I think you got to balance it with being sensible and having a financial plan. But it's a real reminder that life is short, and if you can follow your heart and do it, what gives you fulfillment and a sense of purpose, I think we should do that if we can.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm sorry for your loss. And that's great advice from your friend for sure. And I think the other part of all of this is, you might have a 5-year plan, or you might have a financial plan, and you say, I'm going to be a writer. I've got some money saved. So, and you follow your heart, and that doesn't mean you're going to be a successful writer. You have no idea where you're going to end up, but I can guarantee you exciting things that you never even thought about are going to happen along the way. And they might take you in an entirely different direction, but a direction you never would have gone in had you not followed your path towards writing or whatever it is. So I agree. I think unfortunately it takes either advice from somebody as powerful as your friend, or just age to kind of get to the point where you start realizing that. And so how do you balance being healthy and active and having a fulfilling life with a sense of freedom and pursuit of happiness with, when you're younger, you're feeling like, well, I have to work in a corporate job because this is what people do. What am I, stupid? So it just has to happen to you organically. So your friend telling you that was meant to happen,
Yeah. And even chatting to some of my former colleagues in the wake afterwards, we're having a cup of coffee and something to eat and chatting, and people were asking me, hey, how's things going with you? And when I told them how things are going and the fact that I've really immersed myself in this whole writing thing. And as you said, Carter, when you immerse yourself and direct your energies into something that you love, it just organically creates opportunities, whether it be speaking opportunities at libraries or community events or writers conferences. Like yourself, Harry and I've started a podcast, and then that creates opportunities. You get to meet new people. We wouldn't have met you if it hadn't been for our respective podcasts. So it has this exponential growth when you start to invest your time and energies into something you love. Just organically, opportunities arise. And my colleagues were just saying, because one of my fears was that, because my first book, I first started writing and published my first book while I was still technically a police officer, and I was concerned that there was going to be a conflict of interest. But my colleagues, because I was so fearful that my colleagues would sort of think, well, what sort of wankers writing crime fiction when they're a serving police officer? But they have been so supportive, and to the extent where, some of my ex-colleagues are senior officers now, and they say, oh, that's so cool, I want to buy your book, and they really think it's so cool. So
totally.
Don't downplay it. It is a cool thing if you can get some success.
Totally. And you're right that it does open so many opportunities, but it does take you, the author, and I coach this all the time. You have to take action, right? You can't just sit there and write and do very little else, and you can still be successful. It's very hard, but I preach just say yes to as much as you can. If somebody asks you to do something, they're not paying you, say yes, because you go do that thing, and then somebody in the audience says, hey, can you come speak to my group? They pay you or whatever. And you mentioned the podcast. I started the podcast out of just, I'm interested in talking to writers. I have no aspirations that this is going to make any money, and it doesn't make any money. I lose money on this podcast. But the networking, the names I know, the understanding of people's journeys that, informed how I do things, it's priceless. And I would guess the same for you both.